Do not fly too high, said Aslan. Do not try to get over the tops of the great ice mountains. Look out for the valleys, the green places, and fly through them. There will always be a way through. And now be gone with my blessing. Oh, Fledge, said Diggory, leaning forward to pat the horse's glossy neck. This is fun. Hold on to me tightly, Polly. The next moment the country dropped away beneath them, whirled around as Fledge, like a huge pigeon, circled once or twice before setting off his long westward flight. Looking down, Polly could hardly see the king and the queen, and even Aslan himself was only a bright yellow spot on the green grass. Soon the wind was in the faces, and Fledge's wings settled down to a steady beat. All Narnia, many colors with lawns and rocks and heathers and different sorts of trees, lay spread out below them, the river winding through it like a ribbon of quicksilver. They could already see over the tops of low hills which lay northward on their right. Beyond those hills, a great moorland sloped gently up to the horizon. And on their left, the mountains were much higher, but every now and then there was a gap where you could see between steep pines and a glimpse of the southern lands that lay beyond them, looking blue and far away. That'll be where Archenland is, said Polly. Yes, but look ahead, said Diggory. For now a great barrier of cliffs rose before them, and they were almost dazzled by the sunlight dancing on the great waterfall by which the rivers roar and sparkles down into Narnia itself from high western lands which it rises. They were flying so high already that the thunder of those falls could only just be heard as a small thin sound, but they were not yet high enough to fly over the tops of the cliffs. We'll have to do a bit of zigzagging here, said Fledge. Hold on tight. He began to flying to and fro, getting higher and higher at each turn. The air grew colder, and they heard the call of eagles far below them. I say, look behind, said Polly. There they could see the whole valley of Narnia stretched out to where, just before the eastern horizon, there was a gleam of the sea. And now they were so high that they could see tiny-looking jagged mountains appearing beyond the northwest moors and the plains of what looked like sand in the far south. I wish we had someone to tell us what all those places are, said Diggory. I don't suppose they're anywhere yet, said Polly. I mean, there's no one there yet, and nothing happening. The world only began today. No, but people will get there, said Diggory, and then they'll have histories, you know. Well, it's a jolly good thing they haven't now, said Polly, because nobody could be made to learn it. Battles and dates and all that rot. Now they were over the top of the cliffs. In a few minutes, the valley of the land of Narnia had sunk out of sight behind them. They were flying over a wild country of steep hills and dark forests, still following the course of the river. The really big mountains loomed ahead, but the sun was now in the travelers' eyes, and they couldn't see things in a very clear direction. But the sun had sunk lower and lower until the westward skies, all like one great furnace full of melted gold, and it set at last behind a jagged peak which stood up against the brightness of sharp and flat as if it was cut out of cardboard. It's none too warm up here, said Polly. And my wings are beginning to ache, said Fledge. There's no sign of the valley with a lake in it, like Aslan said. What about coming down and looking out for a decent spot to spend the night? We won't reach the place tonight. Yes, and surely it's about time for supper, said Diggory. So Fledge came lower and lower. As they came down nearer to the earth and among the hills, the air grew warmer, and after traveling so many hours with nothing to listen to but the beat of Fledge's wings, it was nice to hear homely and earthly noises again, the chatter of the river on its stony bed and the creaking of trees in the light wind. A warm, good smell of sun-baked earth and grass and flowers came up to them. At last Fledge was alighted, and Diggory rolled off and helped Polly to dismount. Both were glad to stretch their stiff legs. The valley in which they had come down was in the heart of the mountains, snowy heights, one of them looking rose-red in the reflections of the sunset, towered above them. I am hungry, said Diggory. Well, tuck in, said Fledge, taking a big mouthful of grass. Then he raised his head, still chewing, and bits of grass sticking out of each side of his mouth like whiskers, and said, Come on, you two, don't be shy. There's plenty of grass for us all. But we can't eat grass, said Diggory. Said Fledge, speaking with his mouth full. Well, don't quite know what you'll do then. This is very good grass. Polly and Diggory stared at one another in dismay. Well, I do think someone might have arranged our meals, said Diggory. I'm sure Aslan would have if you asked him, said Fledge. Wouldn't know without being asked, said Polly. I've no doubt he would, said the horse, but I sort of idea he likes to be asked. But what on earth are we supposed to do, said Diggory. I don't know, said Fledge, unless you try the grass. You might like it better than you think. Oh, don't be silly, said Polly, stamping her foot. Of course humans can't eat grass, any more than you can eat mutton chop. For goodness sake, don't talk about chops and things, said Diggory. It only makes it worse. Diggory said that Polly had better take herself home by ring to get something to eat there, but he couldn't himself because he'd promised to go straight on his message for Aslan, and if once he showed up home again, anything might happen to prevent him getting back. But Polly said she wouldn't leave him, and Diggory said that was jolly decent of her. I say, said Polly, I've still got the remains of that bag of toffee in my jacket. It'll be better than nothing. A lot better, said Diggory, but be careful to get your hand into your pocket without touching the ring. This was a difficult and delicate job because they managed it in the end. The little paper bag was very squashy and sticky when they finally got into it, so there was more of a question of tearing the bag off of the toffee than getting the toffees out of the bag. Some grown-ups would rather have gone without supper altogether than to eat those toffees. There were 9 of them in all. It was Diggory who had the bright idea of eating 4 each and planting the knife, for, as he said, if the bar at the lamppost turned into a little light tree, why shouldn't this turn into a toffee tree? So they dibbled a small hole in the turf and buried the piece of toffee. And then they ate the other pieces, making them last as long as they could. It was a poor meal. Even with all the paper, they couldn't help eating as well. When Fledge had quite finished his own excellent supper, he lay down. The children came and sat on each side of him, leaning against his warm body. And when he had spread a wing over it, they were quite snug. As the bright young stars of the new world came out, they talked over everything. How Diggory had hoped to get something for his mother, and how, instead of that, he had been sent on a message. Then they repeated to one another all the signs by which they know the places they were looking for. The blue lake, the hill with a garden on top. The talk of just beginning to slow down as they got sleepy, when suddenly Polly sat up, wide awake, and said, "Hush!" Everyone listened as hard as they could. "Perhaps it's only the wind of the trees," said Diggory. "I'm not so sure," said Fledge. "Anyways, wait. There it goes again. By Aslan, it's something." The horse scrambled up to his feet with a great noise and great upheaval, and the children were already on theirs. Fledge trotted to and fro, sniffing and whining. The children tiptoed this way and that, looking behind every bush and tree. They kept on thinking they saw things, and there was one time when Polly was perfectly certain she had saw a tall, dark figure gliding away in a westerly direction. But they caught nothing, and in the end, Fledge lay down again, and the children re-snuggled under his wings. They went to sleep at once. Fledge stayed awake much longer, moving his ears to and fro in the darkness, and sometimes giving a little shiver with his skin, as if a fly had lighted on him. But it was in the end he slept too.